In this video, we're going to take a look at the basic workflows to creating textures for this character. Now, we're not going to cover the entire character, and if you're new to Painter, you're going to want to check the Getting Started series before watching this video. In this particular video, we're going to focus only here on the upper body, and like I said, we're going to talk about some core workflows so you can quickly create PBR textures and materials. So once you've created your project, the first step is to bake your textures. Now notice here for this project that we have several texture sets. Each one of these texture sets represents a material ID that you set inside your 3D program. Notice here that we're working with upper body was created off a material ID that encompasses the polygons that you see here. Here in Maya, you can see the mesh, and notice here again, the upper body has a single material ID, which means again that this ID will become a texture set in Substance Painter. Now, for this single texture set, I want to break this into several different materials. So notice here that we have some leather, we have different types of painted metal here, and then we have some raw metal. So we want to divide this into multiple materials. And we can do this through masking or by baking an ID map. And so now I want to discuss the process of using an ID map when the core object itself that you're using in Painter only uses a single material ID. So like I said, the first stage is going to be to bake your textures. So here on the upper body texture set, we'll click this Bake Textures, and the core textures that I'm going to bake is going to be normal, world space, ID, ambient occlusion, and curvature. So here I'm just going to uncheck position and thickness. And these are going to be maps that I use throughout the texturing process. Ambient occlusion and curvature in world space will be used with mask generators. So there's two ways to handle the creation of the material ID. Number one, you'll notice that we have this high definition mesh. So when you're baking your normal, you're going to want to bake that from a high definition mesh. So with the high definition mesh, you could go in and add multiple material IDs to the high definition mesh. And when you bake the ID map, the color source, you're going to want to switch this to material color. And so it's going to take a look at whatever mesh you have here in the high definition mesh. And any of the material IDs that you have, since we have this set to material color, is going to take the color from that material and flood the UV shell for the model that we have here as part of our Painter project. So this means that you can get basically the high definition detail for the normal map, and if the high definition mesh contains multiple material IDs, you can use that in the ID bake process. Now sometimes with a high definition mesh, it could be a lot of trouble because you might have a really dense mesh, and going in and trying to select and create these material IDs with that high definition mesh can be a lot of trouble. Also, your high definition mesh is going to need to have UVs as well. So what I will do is take the same object that I used to create my Painter project and use that as the high definition mesh when I'm baking my ID. So let's say I want to go that route. So first, I would come in and just bake these maps and exclude my ID map. And I'm going to use the high definition map that's going to give me the normal information. I could then just bake my ID. What I could do here is just take this high definition mesh, and we'll just remove this here, and you can use this button here to browse for a new mesh. And what I would do is I would take the mesh, the low res mesh that I'm using here in my Painter project, make a duplicate of that, and within my 3D program, I could then use that mesh with the low resolution to easily select faces to add material IDs to. You can just add that here to the high definition mesh. Now technically, of course, it's not a high definition mesh, but that doesn't matter because we're just using it to bake material color ID. So there you have the two options on how you can create this ID map. So now we're going to get started in the process of texturing. And like I said, we're focusing here on the upper body. Here I'm just going to disable the textures, and we're going to start here from this point. The first thing I'm going to do is start with a layer group. So I tend to group all of the materials that I'm going to be working with. So like I said, we have one single material here that represents this texture set. However, within this, I'm going to break this up into several materials. And that's why I'm going to start to group these materials. So this here, I'm going to call this just my metal, and I'll start with a fill layer here. And so I'll place this in, and this fill layer here is going to become my base. So now I'm going to come over to my materials, and I'm going to use a preset. So I'm going to start to type in uni for uniform, and I'm just going to use this uniform cobalt. So here I've just filled this fill layer here with a metal preset. Now this is just a very shiny metal, so I'm going to use a roughness here. And to do that, I'm going to create another fill layer, and I'm just going to name this rough. And I'm going to disable all of my channels here except for roughness. Now for the roughness, I'm going to click this and I'm going to utilize a procedural texture here. So let me utilize this black and white spots too. So I'm going to enable this, and here you can see that the scale is off. And this has to do with the ratio here of my UV shells. So notice here, when I take a look at the overall textile density of these UV shells, I've got a lot packed in here, so I need to adjust the scale for this. And so here, let me jump back over to my 3D view, and I'm going to come over here to my UV scale and just start to increase this value. So I'm just basically tiling this procedural material across the surface. Now, if I want to be able to take this material and project it so that I don't see any seams, I could change the projection mode here to triplanar. And again, that's going to change my scaling a bit. So here, let me just adjust this once more. So here, I've added some variation here to my roughness by utilizing here this procedural noise as an input. However, this procedural noise that I'm using is very contrast, meaning that, you know, it has very stark black and white values. And I'd like to kind of process that. So one of the ways I can do that is just to come over to my effects here and add a levels. So here I've added a levels here to this channel, and for the affected channel I want to target my roughness, and so here I can see my values. Now what I'm going to do here, like I said, is just remap that texture, that procedural noise. So I'm just going to adjust my black output and my white input. And so here I get more of a subtle effect here for this roughness. So if I start to just kind of move my light around, you can see, you know, that this just gives a bit more of a subtle effect. And so here, this is going to cover my base metal. Now what I need to do is mask this. And so since I have my ID map, I'm just going to right click and use the option Add Mask with Color Selection. And so here I can come over to my Pick Color, and I want to be able to choose where I want to place this metal. And so here I'm going to choose this color value here in the ID map, so just a single left click to sample that, and now I've placed this metal. So here I'm going to add Pick Color again, and I'm also going to use this blue. Let's zoom in a bit, and let's use Pick Color once more, and let's choose this value. And here I'm going to zoom in on the mesh, and I'm also going to choose this white here. As well as this gray. So here we'll just kind of back out into the viewport and just kind of look. I notice here that I'm starting to get some edging, so I can adjust my tolerance to fix any of that aliasing that I'm getting there from the bleed over from the ID shells. Okay, so here I was able to just choose where I want that metal to go. And actually on second thought, I think I'm going to remove that gray, because what I'm going to do is there's a little bit of gray around that, and I think instead of making that metal, I'm going to utilize this as a rubber material that I'm going to use later on. So let's just keep it like it is now. So let's say that there's a few areas here that I also want to that were not covered in the ID map that I want to add now. Well, with this, I can come over to my effects and I can add a paint on top of this. And I can start to, if I just click my material button, I'm going to choose the value for full white, and I can actually just start to paint this metal in now. So there may be a few areas where I want to have metal that was not covered in the ID map. So let's just say, for instance, this little circular shape here. Let me come over to my alpha and set my hardness all the way up to 1. And here I'll just do a single stamp to put that into place here for metal. Same here. And so if I want, I can just go, you know, throughout the object here and just choose areas where I would like there to be metal. And utilizing this paint effect allows me to do that in a manual process. So we have an automated color selection here using the ID map, and then I'm refining that using this paint effect on top. So here's another option. Instead of painting, I could actually utilize some of the polygons in the mesh. So what I'm going to do is grab the polygon fill tool, and this is going to overlay a wireframe, which is a little hard to see right now. So let me come over to my viewer settings and just increase my wireframe opacity here. And if I want, I'm actually going to change the color to this so we can really see it here in the video. So let's make this red. And so now you can see that, well, this area here has a nice edge flow that's going to make it very easy for me to select using the polygon fill tool. So here I'm going to go into face selection mode, and with the tool set to white, I can now start to just go in and just click on these polygons here to get a very precise mask based on the mesh topology. So now I would like to add a leather material to this area. So here in my Smart Materials, I'm just going to do a search for leather, and we have several options. I'm going to use this leather brown damaged. So let's just drag and drop and place this here into our layer stack. So here we have the leather. Let's mask. So here I'll add a mask with color selection, and I'll use my pick color and choose this orange value. So this places the leather in this location on the mesh. So now we'll come into our layer stack here and just make a few changes. So first, let's start by changing this color. And here I'm going to come in and change this dirt color as well. And that's going to take care of my leather material. We also have a host of materials available for free on Substance Share. So let me show you how you could utilize a Substance Share material. So here I'm logged into Substance Share, and I'm checking out the Smart Materials, and I'm checking metals, and here is this orange painted robot material that I think is pretty cool and I'd like to use. I can also use any materials from this category as well, so Substance Designer materials that you create can be imported into Painter as well. But in this case, I'm going to use this Smart Material. Now, a Smart Material is a material that is specific to Substance Painter, and it's basically a preset of a stack of layers. I'll show you how this works. So here, like I said, orange painted robot, this is cool, let's use this. I'll just click download, and here I'll just download the .spsm, so this is Substance Painter Smart Material. So once this has been downloaded, I'll show you how we can use this in Painter. So here I am back in Substance Painter, and let's grab that file that I downloaded. So here I can just simply drag and drop this directly here into my Smart Material shelf, and it's going to add that Smart Material. Now to use it, simply drag it here to my layer stack. And it's that easy just to quickly grab a material off Share and use that directly here in my project. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is that if you use the method that I've shown here, where you just drag and drop right into the project, if you were to come over to this file and use this clean option, it's going to remove this Smart Material here from the shelf. It's going to keep it within the layer stack, but if you create a new project, you will no longer see this material. If you want to keep this permanently within your shelf, you need to apply this to your Documents shelf. So here, I'm just navigated to my Documents Substance Painter, and if I look at Shelf, and if I come over here to Smart Materials, I could then take this Smart Material that I downloaded and just add it here to this shelf. Now this Smart Material will be available to me every time I create a Substance Painter project. So like I said, here we have this new Smart Material, and we can go in and start to make some changes to this. So here, let's come over to this layer here, which is our color, and I'm going to change the color around just a little bit. So maybe something more like this yellow. And here, I'm going to come over to the actual mask builder that's controlling this kind of grunge effect, and I'm going to make some changes here as well. Okay, so here I've just made just a few changes here to the mask builder, and I'm going to come back here to this layer, and I'm noticing here that this is not a metallic and it has a dark value. So I think what I'd like to do is just create the effect that this mask generator is scratching away from this dielectric layer and revealing some raw metal underneath. So here with this layer selected, I'm going to come back to my materials, and I'm going to do a quick search here for my uniform cobalt, and let's just utilize this. And so now I have this effect here that we have this dielectric layer, which is this yellow painted layer here, and it's scratching away and revealing, this raw metal underneath of it. And I'm also noticing here that this particular smart material is just utilizing a uniform roughness. And so here I have our metal, and we created this rough layer. And I think I'm just going to reuse that. So here we can just quickly copy, and here I'll just paste in this layer. And here let's just make sure we drag and drop it here into our material group. And so now we're utilizing that same roughness that we used within our metal material that we created. Okay, so now I just need to mask this material. So here we'll just come up to the top, we'll right click, and we'll use Add Mask with Color Selection. And so here I'm going to use the pick color, and I'm going to place this in the red areas. So we'll just select this, and just like that, we've now applied this material here to the appropriate areas on the mesh. So here, if I wanted to quickly create some variation to this, we can take this layer and let's just duplicate it here. And I'm going to come over to the color, and I'm just going to change this color. So maybe we'll try something like kind of like a blue. And so here we're still masking with this color selection, and I'll add a paint effect on top, and I could just use my paintbrush and just paint this value. Or what I'm going to do is use this polygon fill tool, and I'm going to set this to UV mode, and I'll set this color to black, and I can now just come in and just flood the UV shell with this color value. So here, just a really quick way just to kind of vary up, how we're applying materials to the object through masking. Okay, so next, let's just build in a rubber material. So I'm going to start with my group, and here we'll just call this rubber, and we'll create a fill layer, drag this guy into the group, and this is our base. So here for our base, my uniform value here, I'm just going to lower this. Again, just kind of trying to be careful, I'm not going to use black, so I'm just lowering this value here. And for the roughness, I'm just going to set kind of a uniform value to this. Now, what I'm going to do here is go back to my texture where I have my rough effect layer that we created. Let's just copy this guy, and here we're just going to paste it back in. So now we're just kind of augmenting that roughness here with our rough effect, and we now need to mask this. So let's do a right click, and let's choose Add Mask with Color Selection, pick, and we're just going to place this here in this gray value. So I'll just simply left click, and here our texture is placed. Now, like I said, if we're starting to get some issues here around the edging, we may need to just adjust our tolerance. And that'll fix that. So now that I have this, I would like to actually, in this area, also here, is start to maybe try to create more of like a carbon fiber type effect. So what I'm going to do here is go back to my group, my rubber group, and I'm going to create a new fill layer here. And I'm going to turn off all of my channels except for height. And so now I'm going to utilize a texture to drive this height. And I created a texture that I want to use. So here I'm just going to come over to this window explorer here, and I have this pits texture. Now this was just a noise that I actually created in Substance Designer, so I'm just going to drag and drop this here into my texture. And so I can either utilize this texture by clicking this height button and just scrolling through this list to find it, or even easier, since it's here in my texture, I can just left click, drag and drop it right here onto this button. And so at default, it's way too large, so we're going to tile this. So here for UV scale, I'm just going to start to adjust the tiles until I get something like this. Now I notice that this texture here is actually reversed than what I want. So instead of jumping back to Substance Designer and trying to make a change to this, what I'm going to do here is just add a levels to this. So let me just name this layer. So we'll just call this pits. And here is my level. And I need to make sure that I set the affected channel here to height. And then I'm just going to click this invert button. And so this is just going to invert the value in that height map. Now, it's pretty intense, so I'm just going to remap the ranges here by adjusting my output white and black. And so here you can see the effect that I'm getting. Now, let's go back to this fill layer and start to adjust the scale some more. So I'm just going to bring this value down and get something more like this. So I've used the height to, like I said, remap that range for that height, but I can also select the layer, and I'm going to want to choose height. And so now let's just go in and drop the opacity. So this almost acts like a feather control. Okay, so here we kind of have this height displacement, and I don't actually want this here on this area. This is kind of like this piping, which is actually supposed to be more like the rubber. So what I'm going to do is just right-click my pits layer, and I'm going to choose Add a White Mask. So that means it's going to hold out all the values. And then here I'm going to go to my Geometry Fill tool here, or my Polygon Fill tool, and let's see if I can just use UV. So I'm going to set this to black. And let's see if I can just select this pipe here, and let's just see. And so yes, using UV mode is just going to set that mask for me. So here we'll do the same thing on this side, and that'll fix it. So here you can see that we've removed that pit effect here from this area and this area. And now I can go back to this roughness effect, and I think I'm just going to make a few changes to this. Okay, so here we have that in place, and here let's go back to our color selection, and I'm going to use pick color, and I'm also going to utilize or place this rubber effect here on this yellow ID. Okay, so now that we've kind of divided this object up here into these multiple materials, I'm now going to add a dirt effect on top of everything. So here I'm going to add a fill layer, and this here will be our dirt. And I'm going to adjust my roughness fairly high, and let's just choose a color here for this dirt. And now I'm going to add a black mask, so everything's being masked, and with this mask selected, I'm going to add a generator. And we have a great generator for this type of effect here, and it's just called dirt, so let's utilize this guy. And so now we kind of have this dirt effect, so let's go back to the generator itself and just start to tweak some of these values. And I can also go in and just change the blending mode. So let me take this back here to my base color, and let me just play around with some blending modes here. And I don't think I really like that. Let's just leave it at normal, and let's just come into our color and just adjust this a bit more. So here we go. We'll just utilize something like this. And so here you can see just how quick it is to just run through utilizing smart materials to just quickly texture this asset. So now I'd like to show how we can reuse this texture on another texture set. So here we have the head, and now we need to texture the head. Instead of going through this entire process again, what we can do, let me just drop back over here to my body. And what I'm going to do is take all of the work I've done so far, and I'm going to save this into a single group and create a smart material out of it. So here, let me create a group, and for this I'm just going to call this demo, and let me select all of the layers we've been working with and just drag and drop them here into this demo group. And so now that we have this, I'm just going to right click and say create smart material. Now here in my smart materials, we'll now have this demo. So here I have this filter. Let me just filter out and choose demo, and so here it is. Next, we'll jump over to our head texture set, and I can just take this and just left click and drag and drop it here into my layer stack. Now what's really great about this is, since I've baked all of my additional maps here for the head already, Substance Painter is now going to just reapply all these additional maps. So notice here that if we come over here to our metal and I take a look at my color selection, it's reapplied the ID mask to equal helmet. And if I utilize the same material ID scheme between the head and the body, everything will match up. Now in this case, there's a few differences, but for the most part, you can see that my materials have been applied. Now, there's a few changes I want to make. So here, let's go back over to this variation here of our robot. And remember, I had this paint. So here, I'm just going to remove this. And let's add a new paint. So here we'll add a new paint, because remember that I used the polygon fill tool to create the mask. So here we'll just go back into our UV, and I'm just going to here click in this area. And just make a few of these changes here. All right, so let's go with something like this. So now I've just kind of reapplied these, and you can see that, you know, it's so fast to be able to work with the smart materials and maintain the overall color scheme here between the texture sets. Now I notice here that with this head ID, this leather strap is not set correctly. So let me just come over here to the leather color selection, and let's do a pick color, and I'm going to choose this yellow here. And again, with very little effort, you can see that, you know, we've already have our head texture set pretty much textured. Let me also take a look at what we have here for the rubber. So in this case, I'm going to do a pick color. And so this rubber is also being placed here in this yellow area, and I don't really want that. So I'm just going to come in and just remove that yellow here. And I only really want to use this value. So let's do this. And so here, just a quick change to that, and you can see that we now get the texture set correctly masked. Again, if I was using the same, you know, ID values between the different materials on the texture set when I created the ID, you wouldn't have that problem. But I'm showing it kind of this way so you can see how easy it is to fix. Here in this area of the neck, I actually don't have any ID here. So I think what I'm going to do is just come over here to this paint layer, and let's go back to the polygon fill tool. And let's set this to white, and let's see if we can use UV to create some mask really quickly here. And it actually looks like this is being overwritten here by our rubber. So let's go back into the color selection. Let me add a paint effect on top of this. Again, we'll use UV. Let me set this to black. And here we go. I'm just going to come into, you know, some of this area in here and just change the mask. So the last thing that I want to cover here is how to add the emissive channel. So we're still on our head, and I'm going to add an emissive effect to this. So if we take a look here at the texture set settings, I have this emissive channel. So if you don't have this, this is what it may look like by default. So you just click this plus button here and just choose emissive. Now I have this emissive channel. And so what I'm going to do here just for the eyes is I'm just going to create just a new layer. I'll just drag and drop this here out of the demo smart material. And here for this layer, I'm just going to disable all of my channels here except for emissive, and I'll choose an emissive color. And let's come over here to my brushes. And in this case, I'm just going to use the default brush. So let's just grab the default brush here. And then I'm just going to come in and just paint in this stroke. And so here when we back away, you can see that we have this emissive information here. And here, let's just do the reverse to this as well. So we have this guy selected, and for the color, let's drop the color value down. And here I'll make my brush size pretty small. Okay, so here we go. Now if we come back here to our viewer settings, here we have this emissive intensity value. So if I just kind of lower this down a little bit, you can see some of that soft edge that we had for the brush originally is now there. And so here's how we get that emissive texture that we'll utilize once we get back into Unity. And so that's how we can quickly create our materials here for our character. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how we export these from Substance Painter.